So let me just start this video by showing you how Africa looks like, more so in the village, because I'm just located in the villages of Africa. So look how African villages look like. You can see that, super green, just chilling in the village, no hurry, everything is okay. So you see this brown iron sheet here, this one. So this one, possibly in Africa, it is used for fencing purposes, just basically to give you security purposes within the continent of Africa. And I know in most African countries, they normally use these iron sheets to just provide security. Now, if it's the first time here, kindly show me some love by liking this video. Take me to 3,000 subscribers. So President Kagame has been very vocal in relations to matters African development. So in today's video, we are going to analyze on how Kagame has just spoke passionately on the need of Africa as a continent to utilize its potential, more so the resources within the African continent. Look, Africa is one of the richest countries, or rather one of the richest continents in the world. Yet ironically, it is one of the poorest continents, if not the poorest continents in the world. We have more resources within African continent, and yet we are not utilizing the resources. Talk about the natural resources, talk about the human resource. One of the youngest continents in the world, if not the youngest continent in the world, is Africa. Okay, so let's look at what President Kagame talks about in the Africa CEO Forum 2026 in Kigali. Then when we come back, we can analyze the video further. Let's have a look at Kagame's video.
And there are a number of them. So why is Africa always at a disadvantage? When you look back, you see where Africa has been lacking this or that. But really, why, when we have almost everything? If you look at in the area of green energy, and this continent is home to 60% of solar potential. 60% is home to that. Africa is home to that. Then if you look at the critical minerals that talked about, all of them, or the majority, are on the continent for making batteries and so on and so forth. And different powers are fighting over that. But Africa, that has a lot of that, is silent or losing most of it cheaply to those who have the power and know what they want to do. Look at human capital. In terms of human capital, Africa has abundance of that. In fact, whether maybe by now already or in a few years to come, Africa will be having the largest middle class in the world. So how can we have these resources? And then we are here wondering how to overcome some of the challenges that are brought by the geopolitics that we talk about, or the crises that we see happening in every. So we need to come together and do something about it. It's doing something about it. The rest we know. And Amir earlier on was talking about what we lose by not doing a number of things. I think we lose a lot more even by not doing what we have to do.
And so I'm never buying this idea that the problem with Africa is colonization. I don't believe in that. Why do I say that? Because the colonialists, they left Africa 50 years ago. In fact, some of the countries that were at the same level in matters development with Africa, they are now propelling on a different orbit level, catapulted to another economic level as far as development is concerned. Take a good example of Singapore. In fact, I think Kenya as a country was way far in terms of development if you compare it to Singapore like 50 years ago. But now, Singapore is in the real league. Another example is South Korea, performing better. The problem with Africa is simply and squarely one of leadership, nothing else. That we elect people into office, people who value their own interests rather than valuing their countries and their people's interests. People who don't love their countries. We're electing thieves into office. That is our problem. And in fact, if we don't change the way we do our elections, if we don't change the way we perceive our leaders, then Africa will never realize her potential. It is as simple as that. So sometimes it's our problem, we as the electorates who are going to vote, we are the problem. Because tell me, why is it that most people, most politicians in Africa, those ones who are elected into office, are the ones who are very wealthy? If you're not wealthy in Africa, you can never be a politician. Why? Okay, so we leave behind people who love these countries. We leave behind people who are patriotic and people who want to catapult our countries to another level. And we are electing thieves into office and then expecting that miracles will happen. That is not going to happen. Okay, and that is why even the president of Burkina Faso, that is President Traoré was so clear when it comes to democracy and said, this concept of periodic elections, we're electing leaders after every 5 years, it is not going to work in Burkina Faso, because the leaders who are being elected after 5 years, they are doing nothing. So he had to abolish the so-called democratic way of election and just started governing Burkina Faso the way he thinks that Burkina Faso needs to be governed. Okay? And you can see what Traoré is doing. In fact, one of the most celebrated young African presidents in the continent of Africa is President Traoré of Burkina Faso. Traoré is celebrated by each and every African youth. In fact, I think Traoré is one of the most celebrated African presidents. And he is known all over Africa by every African of goodwill. Okay? So look at what he has done in Burkina Faso. Transformed Burkina Faso to another level. But you see, the problem is one. Even though Traoré is transforming Burkina Faso to another level, he is never recognized as the so-called democratic president. Because he was not elected into office. He took power by force. Which I normally explain it like this. We no longer call it as a coup. We call it extraordinary power taking by someone. Okay? This is a person who was very tired. This is a person who saw no future and he decided to take power extraordinarily. Okay? Now, it's not even Traoré alone. We also have other leaders in Africa who love their countries and we can see what they are doing. Another example is President Duma Boko of Botswana, doing massive jobs, being celebrated by the Tswanas, the people of Botswana. Okay? But you see, even though this one, we are talking positivity among some of the African leaders, we also have leaders who are trying to betray Africa. But at the end of the day, I know they'll not succeed to what they are doing. Just look at what happened in Kenya, like 2 days ago, when the president of France, that is President Emmanuel Macron, is being chased from the French colonies in West Africa. Someone in Kenya is welcoming him. That is President of Kenya, President Ruto, welcoming President Macron to Kenya. In fact, as we are speaking, the French troops are set to build their military base in Kenya. Okay? So, on whose interests? If I'm not wrong, it is for the interest of the people who are doing that, not for the interest of the entire population. So even though Africa, we are trying our level best, there are some of the leaders who are trying to pull African back. And this one we have to refuse, and we have to talk about it, and that's why I'm talking about it. For those ones who are good leaders, who are trying to reshape their countries, who love their population, the likes of President Traoré, the likes of the President of Mali, Assimi Goïta, talk about President of Botswana, President Duma Boko. Those are leaders who are shaping this continent, and we have to give them a part for the role that they are playing. So if it's the first time here, like the video, share it with your friend. See you next time. Bye-bye.